And joining us today on India Today is a very special guest. Garry Kasparov is not just arguably the greatest chess player, true chess legend, but also someone who's been a strong critic of Vladimir Putin and Putinism and an advocate of human rights and democracy. Joining me today is Garry Kasparov for this exclusive here on India Today at a time when the war is escalating in Ukraine. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Kasparov. You could perhaps today turn around and tell the world, I told you so. Because I remember in your book 2014, The Winter is Coming, you had warned of the dangers of Vladimir Putin, his autocratic behavior, his dictatorial attitude, you said, to the free world. Is that how you feel today, that what has happened in Ukraine was inevitable, given the kind of person you believe Vladimir Putin is?
This is not the moment where I'd like to celebrate my prescient forecast about Putin's war. I think it could be avoided if the free world was listening, not just to me, but to Putin himself. Because Putin was quite open by declaring his plans, his visions, his strategy. Back in 2007, in February, at Munich Security Conference, he talked about the world that should return to the spheres of influence. He always wanted the world to be divided in the fashion of the past, where the big countries dictated these smaller countries how to behave, how to run their affairs. And as for this latest war against Ukraine, he has been preparing this war in plain sight. This is not, hiding in the bushes, bringing secretly troops. He even brought his Pacific fleet to the Black Sea. So he has surrounded Ukraine from all the directions. And I was shocked that the free world kept negotiating with Putin, ignoring his preparations. And also, one of the defining traits of Putin's character is lying. He has a long record of lying and eventually, turning everything, back and forth to his advantage. And it was utterly stupid not to recognize his intentions towards Ukraine, because he never recognized Ukraine as an independent state. And for many years, Russian propaganda on 24/7 has been denying Ukraine's existence. So I think the attack was very natural. But what is happening now is definitely not going according to his plan, because he failed to take over Kyiv within 2 or 3 days as he planned. And heroic defense of Ukrainians, is threatening very much Putin's image of an invincible leader.
When I read your tweets over the last few days, I sense anger in them. You seem to be angry, outraged at the manner in which Putin is being allowed to get away with this invasion. I look at one of them where you say sarcastically, bravo, NATO leaders have all the weapons and no courage, and Zelensky has courage and not enough weapons. There are no more Churchills in the halls of power, just salesmen and bureaucrats hoping to shuffle papers and avoid meaningful decisions until they leave office. Ukraine has exposed them all, cowering before a thug like Putin. Never again, today, right now. So would I be right to say this is angry? This is an angry Garry Kasparov, angry at the way the so-called free world has dealt with Vladimir Putin?
Absolutely. I'm angry. And, in some of my interviews, I was asked by Dutch and German journalists about my anger. And I say, look, people are being killed. And one of the reasons that you guys for many years ignored these warnings, and you were doing business with Putin as usual. We all learned about appeasement in the 30s, and about Brits and French didn't want to actually to start confrontation with Nazi Germany, and they let Hitler, just grow and to become a real menace for the world. But we can always give an excuse to Chamberlain and Daladier, because they were not doing business with Hitler. The problem of Europe today is that so many politicians in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Britain, they want directly or indirectly connected to Putin's business interests. Many European politicians like Gerhard Schröder, retired politicians, top politicians, recently François Fillon, former prime minister of France, they didn't see anything wrong by serving Putin being on his payroll. So it's a war of Europe's doing, because they have been helping Putin to grow to the level where he believed that he was absolutely invincible and emboldened to attack Ukraine. And also Putin believed that he could do this the same way as he did Crimea annexation 8 years ago. I think he's shocked now to see that Europe eventually is getting its act together. America is also joining, and there's the united front of almost all the nations to oppose this aggression. Because people understand this is not about Putin and Ukraine. This is about the global wealth infrastructure of security infrastructure. And if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, next China, Taiwan. And I'm, by the way, I'm shocked that India at the Security Council abstained from condemnation of Russian aggression because, look, you're also having very belligerent neighbors. And I think recognizing that, the territorial integrity is a key, I think is also in India's interest.
I'll come to how you view India's response in a moment, but there will be those, Mr. Kasparov, who will say, and I've heard some even respected diplomats suggest that Putin is acting in what he believes are Russia's national interests. He doesn't want Ukraine to fall within the EU-NATO umbrella right there on the border, and therefore for Russia's security concerns, national interests, he has chosen to take this decision. How do you respond to those who say Putin is acting in Russia's national interest?
I treat it as an insult for Russia, for my country, and for all people of Russia. It's the same way as saying that Adolf Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin acted in the interest of their respective countries. Vladimir Putin is running a gang, a mafia that took over control of my state, and all he's doing is in favor of this gang. So this war, it will be a stain on the reputation of my country for many years to come. And I hope that, during my lifetime, we can repay Ukrainians the debt of crimes committed by Putin's regime. Now, the whole story about NATO enlargement is a total nonsense that is being spread by either useful idiots or those on Putin's payroll. Estonia joined NATO in 2003. Estonia is 150 kilometers from St. Petersburg. I never heard about NATO troops threatening St. Petersburg. This is not about Ukraine joining EU and NATO. And by the way, it's a sovereign right of any state, and Ukraine is a big state, it's biggest in Europe, by the way, to decide how they conduct their policies. But if not for NATO offering protection to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and other Eastern European countries, don't you think that Russian tanks will be rolling now on the streets of Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn? Yeah, we know the answer. So it's not about these countries threatening Russia. NATO is a defensive alliance. It's about Russia's imperialism and Putin's gangsterism that is creating this threat and attacking the neighboring countries. He annexed Crimea 8 years ago. And by the way, Ukraine did absolutely nothing. It was powerless, and all it wanted is just to be protected against further invasion. And now they are defending their land, and it's our duty to help Ukraine to bury Putin's military armada and to end these talks about NATO threatening Russia. It's threatening Putin's regime. And I'm as many of my friends and colleagues and compatriots, we wish Ukraine to win this war against Putin.
That's exactly what I was going to come for. You say many of your compatriots want Ukraine to win this war. But the fact is, you can speak out openly. You're outside Russia. You were forced out in a way to go into exile. But what about those within? Why aren't we seeing more voices then of protests from within Russia? Why am I not seeing more voices on the street in Russia saying, we don't want war?
Oh, I think you are misled. You don't expect millions of people on the streets right now, but in the last 72 hours, we saw tens of thousands of people making the streets of Russia. There are more than 2,000 people arrested for the anti-war protest. And you say, oh, it's not enough. Russia is a country of 145 million people. Why you have only 50, 60,000 people in the streets? But these people know that demonstrating on the streets of Russia under Putin's regime, it may end up very poorly for them. Many of those who are arrested will be in jail, not for days, but maybe for years. But you could see growing anti-war sentiment, not only among ordinary Russians, but even those who supported Putin before, now they're signing petitions. It's a slow process, but it's an erosion of Putin's power. And the military defeat in Ukraine, actually, it's not a defeat, but it's a failure to achieve Putin's goal to subdue Ukraine and to put puppet government in Kyiv, could lead to more protests in Russia. It's a chicken and egg, there is a reciprocity. So the Putin's weakening support in Russia depends on his geopolitical weakness that is shown in Ukraine, and also by the fact that first time Russia is facing united world, not just condemning the invasion, but also helping Ukraine and making Russians to pay for Putin's aggression. And I think many people are not willing to share this cost with Putin because the sanctions this time will be really damaging for Putin's economy.
You know, that's the other point. The sanctions that are being put in place, including individual sanctions against Putin, against the foreign minister of Russia, quite apart from the so-called oligarchs who have benefited from Mr. Putin's rise. Do you believe that they will actually have an effect of deterrence on Mr. Putin? There's been talks that that there could be some negotiations in the next few days. Do you believe that these sanctions will hurt? What more would you like to see happen, Mr. Kasparov?
Look, this time we're not talking about deterrence because the war already broke. So it's about bankrupting Putin war machine. Putin enjoyed an enormous amount of free cash to invest in his military, in his police, in the propaganda. He built this war machine. And it's very important now to deny extra cash that he can invest in this war. The war is a very expensive exercise. I don't know the cost. I would bet you it's at least $10 billion a day. And now you already see that many Russian tanks, they stop because they are short of fuel. So logistically, it's not easy to continue war in a big country like Ukraine with alien population and with a strong army fighting back. So we may see the beginning of negotiation if Putin recognizes that his war efforts fail. But again, it depends not only on the success on a military battlefield, but also unity of the free world to attack Putin around the whole perimeter. One of the things is, of course, its isolation of Russia on international arena. I argue that all the countries that are condemning this invasion, they have to recall their ambassadors from Russia. So to minimize the diplomatic ties, not cutting them, but minimizing and sending Russian ambassadors back home. They should also kick Russia out of international organizations, sport organizations, or Interpol. So that's the way to show that Russia is isolated. And of course, to do sanctions that will hurt Putin's war machine. That's going against big Russian banks. It's slowly coming to the point, to boiling point. I hope it could happen earlier, but now I think the world recognizes it's not about deterrence anymore. It's about destroying Putin's ability to launch aggressive wars against Russian neighbors.
Would you say, and you as a great sports person, would you agree with cutting off all sporting ties with Russia? Poland has just called off a World Cup playoff match with Russia that was scheduled for next month. We're told that St. Petersburg will not host the Champions League's final. That's been pulled out. Do you believe Russia should be isolated by the entire global sporting community? Do you believe that too will have an impact?
Absolutely. It's hard to me to say. Again, I spent my life defending the colors of my country. But it's very important for international community to show that there is a price that everybody pays. Because all we want is more people to join anti-war movement, more people to express their unwillingness to live under Putin. So to weaken his grip on power, we have to show that there is a price to pay. I hate thinking that it will have an effect on some of my competitors who want to compete and just to continue, just their sporting career. But this is a time where we're talking about human lives. So Putin's ability to continue the war will cause many thousands, tens of thousands of people to die. So, and when we have to choose between human lives and someone's career or some events, whether it's sport or culture, I think the choice is very easy.
You earlier said that you were disappointed with India's reaction at the UN Security Council, but we've seen the way the Chinese have also reacted. They've, called for restraint, but not condemned the action of Vladimir Putin. Russia wants to create, it appears, its own sphere of influence. While you might want the world to condemn Russia as a principled stand, countries like India will argue that the West also has double standards. When the Chinese commit aggression into India, in Ladakh, for example, the Western world doesn't condemn China aggressively enough. Do you believe the time has come for the global community to ensure that those who are these muscular nationalist strongmen, or those who pursue ideologies that look for annexing territory, going to war, the world must unite against them? But it's easier said than done, Mr. Kasparov.
I agree, but we have to start somewhere. Yes, you're absolutely right. Double standards, absolutely. The world now is ignoring genocide of Uyghurs in China. The world is turning a blind eye on destruction of Hong Kong democracy, which China guaranteed by signing the agreement with Britain about return of Hong Kong to China. Dictators never respect the agreements. They just turn them down, tear them apart when they think it's fit. So that's why for all democracies, and India is one of them, it's very important to get united and to start building the world where the rule of law will prevail. It's not easy. Yeah, we know that, there's still big countries like China or Russia or Iran, totalitarian countries, religious dictatorships that are not willing to play by the rules. But we have to get together. And that's why I think that India should find its place among democratic nations that will be pressing this, exactly the point that you made. No exceptions. I see no difference between violations of human rights and international law, whether it's done by China, by Russia, or by whoever around the globe. And this is the right moment. We saw first time that the international community is willing to stand against the aggressor. Because God forbid Putin prevails in Ukraine, China goes against Taiwan. And God knows what else happens in your part of the world, because China is belligerent power, and Xi Jinping is watching Putin. So and trying to measure his next step, whether he can actually push or he should wait. So defeating Putin is important for everybody, including India.
Do you though think that the Russians themselves, as you said earlier, you believe that these protests in Russia will gather momentum? Do you believe that Putin and Putinism, most Russians, including the so-called silent majority, have had enough of Putinism?
I hate being wrong because I have to be optimistic. I had to leave my country facing imminent arrest 9 years ago, and I want to see these signs for optimism, but you never know. But there's the first time in many years when I could see the cracks in the Putin's in the shield of Putin's dictatorship. And if Putin fails in Ukraine, I hope it may lead to downfall of his regime. And I would love to become useful for my country and help Russia to become the force for good and part of the global solution of the problems that we have been discussing now in the last 15 minutes, and not to be the source of permanent problem.
Right. Well, one final word on Mr. Zelensky. He's emerging as a bit of a hero. He's someone who's standing up to Putin. Do you think Putin's been taken by surprise? And do you believe that, in a sense, he's the kind of figure who the world should rally around today?
You never know what happens, with people at the crucial moments in history. I think maybe years to come, we will look at the previous night in Kiev as this turning point, where President Zelensky, who was a comedian, who was an actor, turned into a hero. I think his decision to stay in Kiev and to rally the government behind him at the night of Russian assault, at the time where they knew that if Kiev is taken, he would be killed. Putin made left no doubts that he was planning to liquidate, as he said, decapitate Ukrainian government. And I think that's went against Putin's calculation, because it rallied Ukrainians behind their government, and it raised the morale and spirit. And he deserves our utmost respect. And I think that. I hope that was a turning point in this war.
A final word, therefore, from you, Mr. Kasparov. Today, are you someone who, therefore, would go back to Russia, presumably, if you believe there would be the end of the regime. You believe Russia deserves better than Putin. Am I correct?
Yeah, of course, I believe Russia deserves future, and Putin doesn't offer the future. Putin is the enemy of my country, who is bringing it back to the past and ruining every opportunity for Russia to become a successful state.
Right. Well, Mr. Kasparov, you've spoken like you played chess with aggression, and you believe that Vladimir Putin is someone who represents a danger to democracies across the world. It's Ukraine tomorrow. Who knows? It could be Moldova or some other part of the world. You believe that this is an aggression which is unprincipled. You refuse to accept that this is in Russia's national interest. You are one of the most outspoken voices against the Russian president that the world has, and perhaps the most credible that the world has, given your stature in the global world of chess as well. Importantly, you're calling for sanctions even in the world of sport. I appreciate your joining us, Mr. Kasparov, and speaking your mind here to India Today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So, valued opportunity to talk to people of India.